Thank you, Mary, so much, and hi, everybody. It's a thrill to be with you. As you mentioned, I spent 19 years on the adjunct faculty at the University of Michigan's Executive Education Center. It was a great thrill. Every month for 19 years, I commuted from Florida, where I live, up to the University of Michigan. Somebody asked me, one of my friends in Florida didn't understand about the university, said, what is that adjunct? What is that adjunct? I said, it's a Latin word that means no benefits. But I had a great moment there, and probably about my 8th or 10th year, every month they would fill out, the people in the business people would fill out evaluations, and then I would get them about 2 weeks later. And they would have a semantic differential kind of thing where they would gauge your speaking skills, and then there were suggestions, a place for them to make suggestions. And we had some very pithy suggestions. My all-time favorite was under the heading of how could this seminar have been improved? It was heat the Danish. I thought that was quite powerful. But anyhow, these were filled out anonymously, and I was thumbing through them one day and looking, and they all seemed pretty good. And then I came to one and it said this: today's speaker was the most sexist speaker I've ever heard. I will not only never come to one of his programs again, I will tell everyone in my business, my organization, to stay away from his seminars at the University of Michigan. Now, like any of you who present, I have an ego, and I thought, oh my gosh, they slipped somebody else's evaluation form. And I looked up at the top and it said, today's speaker, and she had written in Lou Heckler, and I was dumbfounded. I really tried to think of what I might have said. Did I say something off the cuff that I didn't mean to say? Well, that didn't fit with my view of me. So I called Fran Green, who was my coordinator at the university, and I said, Fran, you were in the room with me. Did you see that one evaluation? Yes. What did I say? She said, I don't know. I said, well, they filled them out anonymously. Do you think you know who this was? She said, oh, I know who it was. She was pretty rough on everybody. And I said, well, give me her phone number, please. I want to talk to her. I want to know what happened. So she happened to work for a company in the Midwest, and I called her phone number, and unfortunately she did answer. And I said, hi, this is Lou Heckler from the University of Michigan's Executive Education Center. Silence. A few weeks ago, you were in one of my seminars there at the university, and you filled out an evaluation form, and I am very sorry for what you said, and I would like to fix it, but I don't know what I said. Could you tell me? She said, yes, Mr. Heckler, I could tell you. Every single time you referred to a manager, a leader, a business owner, you used male pronouns. There happen to be women leaders in this country, sir, and I'm one of them. Click. I learned most of my English from Miss King in 7th and 8th grade. And because of my age, when I was growing up, in a group like this, if it was time to pass papers in, those of you who are around my age, you know what we would say, right? Wouldn't everybody please pass his papers in? And I was using those pronouns because that's how I was taught English. And I hadn't adapted to the changing times. I thought, wow, thank you. Not necessarily for the delivery system, but for the method. To me, it was a very important moment because it reminded me that we can be led by those we lead, that we can learn from those we lead. And it has been my privilege over the last 40 years, roughly, in business, to sit at the feet of and listen to top leaders from all over the country, all over the world for that matter. And it taught me to be an effective leader. It's really about choices that we make. There are zillions of choices all great leaders make. I'm going to talk about 3 of them today. They're not the 3. They just happen to be 3 that fit into the time frame that we have. And 3 that I believe in very strongly from my experience as a person who's handled leadership roles and as one who has loved studying other leaders. The first one is, all great leaders have a vision that can prompt action at every level. A vision. I talk to salespeople in sales organizations. Very interesting. If I go to people who are pretty good salespeople, And I say to them, do you have a certain quota you're trying to reach each month in your sales? They all say, oh yes, and they quote it for me exactly. They quote the quota. If I go to the top salesperson and say, do you have a quota you try to reach every month? Invariably they say, oh, well, you mean a company quota or mine? Because their vision is always greater. Their vision is always more profound. So how do we create a vision for the people at our universities, for the people in our communities, even for people in our families? The first question I think great leaders ask is it big enough and is it small enough? Is it big enough in that it will matter? Is it Dr. Charles Garfield, a researcher in the area of peak performance, used to say, all peak performers have a mission that matters. Does it have a mission that matters? But is it small enough that regardless of where I am, what community I'm in, what my background is, that I feel like I can embrace that, and more importantly, that I can understand it? The second thing is, can I communicate it clearly? Do I have a way of communicating that clearly? Some years ago, I was asked to speak up at a Rochester Institute of Technology. They were instituting a new program on the campus where they wanted everybody to feel responsible for everything that went on the campus. And in my session, there was everybody from the president of the university to the groundskeeping staff. And so I had some buttons made, and I know you can't really see it from where you are, but I had some little buttons made like this that say, I'm in charge here. And I said, I want everybody to put these on and wear these around the campus. And so if somebody comes up to you, you're gardening, and somebody comes up to you and says, excuse me, where's the Student Life Center? You can't say, oh, I don't know, I just work out here on the grounds. You need to take charge. And it caught on really well. Now, there was a moment that day that I loved, and unfortunately it happened off mic. I wish it had been on mic. I was already finished. And I was stepping off the stage, and a gentleman came up to me and said, you don't have any extra buttons, do you? I said, yeah, I do. Why do you need one? He said, I want to give one to my wife. I said, give her yours. But anyhow, another time I had some buttons made for another talk I was giving. They just say, go first. Sometimes we're reluctant to go first. We're reluctant to set the pace, to be the person of vision. I like to be around organizations where they do this. I'm just going to mention a few of them. Our son lives here in the Atlanta area. They're members of an All Saints Episcopal Church, and one of the ministries of that church has to do with refugees. If you're not from this area, you may not know there's a little town outside of Atlanta called Clarkston. And Clarkston has decided our vision for this small community, we will be a refuge for refugees. And so there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there, and my son's church and the other churches in the community really minister to these people. They greet them when they come off the plane. They have already set up an apartment for them. They have it furnished. They have food in the refrigerator. And over a period of time, they help them with their English and so on. Now, the one family that my son and his family work with is a fascinating situation. The woman was 14 years old in Iran, sold into a marriage. Had 2 children by the age of 19, moved to Afghanistan, figured out her husband was a heroin addict, divorced him, strike one, was of the wrong sect in Afghanistan, strike 2, and then went to work for the U.S. military, strike 3, and she was starting to get a lot of threats. So she came to the folks at the military and said, could you get me to the United States? So now they live in Clarkston. And she comes with these 2 daughters, so they have no money, they have almost no English, they have no education, because of course the girls were devalued in their homeland. And now they're both in a very fine program called the Global Village Project, which helps 38 young women every year to get the skills they need to get into middle school, to get through middle school someday, to get into a high school. And the mother, Khadija, works at the Ritz-Carlton in a section of Atlanta north of this called Buckhead. I think I better use this other mic now. It's starting to cut out a little bit. Is that right? Is it cutting out? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So Khadija works at the Ritz-Carlton, and one of the things I like about the Ritz-Carlton, and part of their vision is, they have what they call the 10-foot rule and the 5-foot rule. The 10-foot rule is, and she's on the housekeeping staff, she had to start somewhere, but if one of the guests in the hotel comes within 10 feet of you, you acknowledge them and say hello. And or you at least acknowledge them, but maybe with a head nod. If they come within 5 feet of you, you speak to them. And so it's how the Ritz-Carlton develops that reputation of ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. At the Disney World, I just read this recently, and like all of you, I've been to Disney World many times. We happen to live 2 hours from the mouse. And I used to ask in big seminars, how many of you have been to Disney World? Most people had. What's the number one adjective that comes to your mind when you think of it? And what do you think most people said? Clean. Not fun, not fantasy, not clean. I wondered, how do they do that? One of my questions always was, how do they keep thousands and thousands and thousands of acres clean when the guy that runs the 7-Eleven in our neighborhood can't keep the junk out of the parking lot? And it's called 27 steps. 27 steps. There are no trash cans in Disney World that are farther than 27 steps from any other trash can. Because they actually had somebody do research on that and figure out that that's about how far somebody will walk around with a gum wrapper or one of those paper things that hold up an ice cream cone or whatever before they're looking for some place to drop it. Now, in addition to that, of course, they have lots of kids running around picking things up. But just the notion of the vision of the number one thing we're going to be known for is not necessarily fantasy, it's cleanliness. It's an interesting version of vision. And then also on the vision, as I work toward that vision, I've noticed that this is always a hard one to say because, as Mary said, I had this audio series called Achieving Excellence, and as I was preparing that, one of the things I had to come to grips with was excellence didn't mean perfection. I remember reading a phrase one time that said something like, the surest path to destruction is the quest for perfection, or some such wording. And what I find with the great leaders is they want to be really, really good, and they want everybody around them to do great things, but they're not expecting perfection because they know that can stop people. It's kind of like if you have an exercise for a while and there's that irritating guy in your neighborhood that's always running and doing push-ups on the street and stuff like that. You're thinking, gosh, all I've ever done is like jump to a conclusion once in a while. Another trait of great leaders is that they're constantly open to feedback and change. And that's no big surprise, is it? I mean, it's not, as one of my silly friends says, this isn't rocket surgery. Feedback is incredibly important. So the first question under that I noticed they ask is, am I the leader really open to communication? Some years ago, I went to a seminar at the University of North Carolina conducted by Dr. Gerald Bell. I know some of you may know him. He wrote a wonderful book called The Achievers. And Dr. Bell was talking about what great leaders do, what great achieving leaders do. And I always remember his saying, one of the great questions all great leaders ask their followers is there anything I'm doing that's keeping you from being great? Is there anything I'm doing that's keeping you from being great? At that time, I was managing 17 people on a staff of a television station in Richmond, Virginia, and I thought, that's a good question. So I went back to the staff, and I held a staff meeting, and I said, hey guys, I was just at this seminar, and the leader asked us to ask this question. I thought I'd ask you, is there anything I'm doing that's keeping you from being great? And like 4 hands went up. And I called on one of the people, and actually, some of you may remember this name. I'm not trying to drop names here. But the fellow who spoke up first was Spencer Christian. Do you remember him? He used to be on Good Morning America. That time he worked for us at Richmond. And Spencer put up his hand, and he said, yeah, Lou, actually, yeah. He said, when you ask us a question, it's not a question. It's just something you want us to agree to. Now, Dr. Bell said, when you hear this feedback, it won't always sound like what you want it to sound like. But you don't want to make an assumption, so then you say, really? Wow, thanks. Could you give me an example? So I said, really? Wow, thanks. Could you give me an example? And 6 hands went up. And they were all right when they gave me that example. Now, in my defense, I had just come out of 3 years in the United States Army, where you didn't really get to ask questions too much. You pretty much had to do whatever anybody said, and I think I was still using that method. I went home that night, and my wife, John Ellen, said, well, how was today? I said, well, I got kind of beat up. Really? Yeah, kind of, yeah. What happened? I told her. She said, oh my gosh, you do that to me all the time. But once again, It reminds me of something that John Maxwell said in one of his books. It's just a simple little phrase, but isn't it funny how sometimes those little phrases stick in your head? He said, good leaders ask great questions. I think that's a great question. I can say that because I didn't think it up. Is there anything I'm doing that's keeping you from being great? And then can you act on that feedback? Feedback is so important. Remember when Ken Blanchard wrote The 1 Minute Manager a bunch of years ago, and then he wrote a follow-up book called Putting the 1 Minute Manager to Work. In that book he said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. Not Wheaties, feedback. This came to light to me when we moved to Florida about 35 years ago, I guess now. We moved to Fort Myers, and it's a wonderful town on the southwest coast. It's something you should get acquainted with, because someday you'll all be required to live in Florida. And drive poorly, I might add. But we had to go around and find all the different doctors and automobile repair places and all the stuff you need to do when you move to a brand new city where we'd never lived. And somebody had recommended a dentist to us, so we set up an appointment to go to the dentist, not too far from our home. And we just happened to set it up that I was able to go on a Tuesday, and my wife was able to go on Wednesday. So I went, and I really liked the dentist, but I thought the hygienist was rough. In fact, she hurt me. She really hurt me. And I thought, well, I'm going home and tell John Ellen maybe she better pick somebody else, because my wife's teeth are her hobby, and she really takes great care of her teeth. I didn't want her to get hurt. Now, here's the thing. And I know, maybe guys do this more than ladies. I don't know. Do you talk to yourself? Yeah. I just actually saw somebody in the back going like this. So now I'm talking to myself on the way home, and I'm saying, well, yeah, I have been on the road quite a bit, and I didn't take the water pick with me. And the other night, after I flossed my teeth, then I went and had that chocolate chip cookie, and I kind of decided maybe I just hadn't taken very good care of my teeth. So I got back home, and my wife said, well, how was it? I said, oh, the dentist, fantastic. Young guy, probably had him for years. Great, wonderful. How about the hygienist? Thorough. Thorough would be the word. Very thorough. Yeah, really, really thorough. So she went the next day, and at that time my office was in a little room in the back of our house, and not a real good sign when the door slams coming in from the garage, and the footsteps came kind of heavily back to my office, and she said, Lou, why didn't you tell me? I said, what? Tell you what, dear? She said, that girl hurt me. Now, here's the thing. It's embarrassing sometimes when you laugh at the wrong moment. You know what I mean? It's not like a, this is really funny laugh. It's just a, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble laugh kind of thing. And I started to laugh. I probably shouldn't have. Well, anyhow, when I came to, she said, you call him and you tell him we're not coming back, or if he doesn't fix this. I said, okay. So I called him, and he listened very carefully. I was intrigued. He said, let me look into that, Mr. Heckler, and I'll call you back on Friday. This was Wednesday. And, I hate to say this, but in all honesty, I thought, oh, yeah, sure, but he won't. But he did. He called back, he said, Lou, this is Dr. So-and-so. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that feedback you gave me. I've looked into it further, and we have just sent her to 3 additional weeks of training. I said, wow, well, good for you, thank you. Did you ask some of your other patients? He said, no, I had her clean my teeth. She hurt me. That's a man who believed in feedback and how important it is. The other thing is, when we're getting feedback, I also noticed that leaders tap into all of their constituencies. They don't just tap into the same people over and over and over again. They're constantly, whether they're actually forming little groups, whether they're doing focus groups, whether they're maybe doing little mastermind groups with other friends. I have a lot of friends in business who, they start these things, Tom Peters in his books used to call skunk works, where they get people they'll get somebody from academia and somebody who's in medicine and somebody over here, around them, and they all brainstorm to try to come up with ideas that will help each other, because they want to get feedback from outside the people that they normally are associated with. You've seen this at Whole Foods. A lot of the Whole Foods stores have that bulletin board up in front of the store with the index cards and the little pen in the little pocket. And if you have a question, you can write something on there and tack it up on the board. And then by the next day, they'll have somebody put an answer up there. They want to get feedback from their constituencies. There's an outfit up in Connecticut. It's actually a suburb of New York, but it's in Connecticut. And they have a grocery store up there, and they have a van that sits out in front of their store called the One Great Idea Club. That's on the van. And every so often, the owner of the store gets somebody from produce and somebody from meats and somebody from this and that and this and that. And they get in the van and they drive off somewhere. They go to a store that has nothing to do with grocery or dairy stores. And they walk around there, and the idea is, let's come back with one great idea that we can adapt or adopt and use here to make us better. And by the way, if you can do it without it costing us any money, that would be great as well. But the whole idea is to sample a lot of different constituencies for those ideas. In the speaking business, we end up in unusual places at unusual times. It's called good rates. That's what, I just got back from 5 days in Phoenix. Yeah, good rates. Because the sun was booked and 120 degrees or whatever it was. Okay. Well, this is a story that has to do with tapping into constituencies. I was asked to speak one year to the Minnesota-Dakota Hardware Dealers Association. Minnesota-Dakota Hardware Dealers Association in Duluth on February 15th. Good rates. Do the kids still have globes, or are they all virtual globes? I don't know. If your child has a globe or your grandchild has a globe, look on it. Duluth is about that far from the North Pole. And I'm flying up there on St. Valentine's Day. Now, the fellow who was the meeting professional said to me, Lou, we'll already be in meetings when you get here, so we won't have somebody come and pick them up. Now, one of the cool things about being a speaker is once in a while, you get to ride in the limo. So I thought, well, all right. So anyhow, I got in this 82 Dodge van, and we drove right downtown to the hotel. And the gentleman who was driving said, sir, would you like me to bring your bag in? I said, yes, I would, as I bolted into the lobby. And I went up to the front desk, and I said, hi, I'm Lou Heckler. I'd like to register, please. And the lady went like this. Mr. Heckler, I have your name up now. She said, oh, I see you're here to speak to the Minnesota-Dakota Hardware Dealers Association, eh? I said, yeah, yes, I am. She said, oh, that's so good. Yeah. Are you one of them dealers? I said, no, I'm actually just a speaker. Oh, hey, they're going to have a cocktail party tonight. You're going to want to go to that, ain't you? I said, well, if it's here in the hotel, yes. I particularly want to go back. It's like no degrees outside. She said, well, actually, it's going to be in the hardware store across the street. I said, oh, we got a cocktail party in the hardware store. Is there some way I can get there without going outside? She said, oh, yeah, we got them over street walkways. You go up there to that third level, go across that little bridge there, across the street, go back down here right there. Toasty. I said, now, I hate to admit this, and I hope there are other men listening, but I have no sense of direction. Where exactly on the third floor is the tunnel? She said, oh, Mr. Heckler, yeah, sure. Look, could you find your way back down here to the desk? I said, yeah, they'll probably do that. You come down here at 6:15, there's going to be a Dixieland band. Lead everybody over. Okay, so let's review the last couple of minutes here. What we're saying basically is on St. Valentine's Day in Duluth, Minnesota, a Dixieland band will lead a group of people to a cocktail party in a hardware store. So is this like a treatment for a possible script for Seinfeld? What is this? But anyhow, we come back down at 6:15 and hear all these little old gentlemen with the straw hats and the bow ties, string ties, and we're going across it. We go to the hardware store, and it's very nice. And the first thing they do is they hand you, I hope this doesn't happen at your party tonight, they hand you champagne in those some assembly required glasses. And of course, what happens? The bottom falls off. Now you're walking around with a stem hoping they sell clay or something, so you can go and put it in there. And a man comes up to me and says, "Hey, Lou, have you been in the basement, eh?" No, we don't have basements in Florida. What's that? I was joking. He said, "Oh, you got to go down there. You know, it's like one of them Home Depots or something. Go down there. You got to see it. It's really cool." Now the thing is, and again, fellas, I'm sorry, I'm not a good mechanic. I'm not handy. Okay, let's just put a fine point on it. My tool kit at home is a big old Charmin box I got at Sam's, and it's got a hose and a hammer. I mean, so if you can't hit it or wet it, I'm pretty much out of this. But I said, okay, let's go down and look. So I go, and it's very cool down there. It's very neat. Top's like a conventional store. At the bottom, they have these huge bins, and they have these huge bins of PVC pipe and screws and nails and bolts and all kinds of stuff. And then there's a 6-foot table covered with packaged Danish. Like you'd find at your local grocery store, the little green tray, the little, I don't know, bear claws or whatever they are in there, and the little plastic. Oh, really? So I thought, that's really odd. I went upstairs and I found the owner of the store, and I said, "Lars." Okay, his name was really Jim, but it makes a better story. Anyhow, I said, "Lars, what's up with the Danish?" He says, "Oh, Lou, you know, I run this here store for 19 years. For 18 of them years, we open up downstairs here like at 6 in the morning because all them contractors is coming in here, you know, buying stuff. For 18 of them years, they'd say to us, 'Hey, where's the guy get breakfast around here?' You know, we've done it, don't you? We'd send them down the cafe down the street at that Mickey D's out there on the highway. His last summer is a favorite of one of my old buddies. His 18-year-old kid getting ready to go down there to St. Olaf. He comes in here, told him to go down there and count stuff, you know. He's down there doing inventory. About the third day, he comes to me and says, 'Hey, Jim, why are we chasing everybody out of this here store in the morning? This is crazy. My dad's brother-in-law owns one of them wholesale bakeries. You know, we could get some good sugary stuff in here and maybe get some decent coffee, not that machine stuff. Maybe them Starbucks people or one of them would come in here and help us.' So he said, I thought, I'll humor the kid. He says, 'Lou, in 3 months, the dadgum bakery is a profit center for my store. And in 6 months, contractor sales has gone up 20%. By listening to a constituency that you normally wouldn't listen to.' And it's such a lesson for me because I'd love to think that I'm this informed, this enlightened leader who would always do that. But I got to tell you, when I heard that, I thought, boy, that is so bright. And I think if I'd been there, I might have given my son speech. You ever give that speech? Son. You've been here 3 days, you know, that kind of thing. And you think you know what to do. But you have to listen to those fresh voices and act on that feedback. I love this one. One day I was at a hotel in Northbrook, Illinois. And I was waiting outside. I was greeting some of the people. It was going to be an all-day seminar. And past me came one of the housemen, one of the fellows that works in the back of the hotel. Had on kind of a gray outfit, and he was carrying a fishing tackle box. And he walked right past me into the room while I was greeting people. I thought, what is he doing with a fishing tackle box? And when he came back out about 30 seconds later, it wasn't with him. I thought, oh, well, whatever. I went back into the room now about 5 minutes later, and there was the fishing tackle box sitting up on the table next to my materials. I thought, oh, you forgot it. But, you know, it's kind of like when you find a diary at your friend's house and they're not looking, you got to look inside, right? So I opened up the fishing tackle box. This is what was inside. I made a list. Magic markers, a stapler, masking tape, cellophane tape, paper clips, scissors, a staple remover, Kleenex, whiteout, pencil sharpener, Post-it notes, wet nap towelettes, pencils and pens, erasers, a thumb drive, a laser pointer, rubber bands, Band-Aids, and cough drops. It's the speaker's first aid kit. It's everything a speaker had ever given feedback on. He'd say, hey, why don't you guys have such and such in the room with me? And they paid attention. So, you know, maybe when you get back to your university, maybe you say, who else do we need to listen to? Where else can we get ideas? How can we get better at what we do by listening to people outside that don't do what we do? It's sort of the concept of tell me more. And then when you do, are you willing to enlist others and let go of a little bit of the control? Maybe say that, well, you know, that is a great idea. How would you like to head that up? Would you like to carry that out for me? I don't know about you. In all of my leadership positions over the years, I freely admit that's the hardest thing for me to do. Because, you know, I keep that voice, I keep hearing that voice in my head. I can do it myself in 20 minutes. I'll teach you to do it, it'll take 2 hours. And you'll mess it up. And it'll take me 3 days to fix it, you know, all that stuff. But you just have to let that go. Now, the other thing is, I've also noticed that the great leaders, when they're doing this, they pay attention to what they think made sense at first that now doesn't make sense. Do you know what I'm saying? Signs. You see signs like that sometimes? I'm a fan of signs that say things that they don't intend them to say. I was speaking at a conference on Sheraton Sand Key in Clearwater, Florida one time. And I don't know why it was set up this way, but the meeting rooms were all on one level, and for some reason the men's and ladies' rooms were one floor up. Who decided? I don't know. So they had signs all over the lobby that said, for restrooms, use stairs. Didn't seem like a good idea in a hot climate. But the all-time most amazing one I ever saw, and this is it right here. This is a sheet that was in a book at a condominium in Dillon, Colorado, that a friend of mine had as his timeshare and didn't need his week, and let my wife and I use the week at this time. And it was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If you don't know where Dillon, Colorado is, when you come out of Denver and go west on I-70, right after you go through the Eisenhower Tunnel, kaboom, it's right there. It's just gorgeous. And it's on a lake, and everything is perfect. And it has a book there, like you would have in this hotel, telling you where the churches are and where this is and where that is. And this was the first page. And it says, can you see this from here? What does it say right there at the top of that page in dark letters? Welcome. Welcome. This is the thank you. It's the welcome letter. Welcome letter. Now my question is, how many people read this and thought it was a great idea? And said to the person who wrote, yeah, perfect. There are 8 things to welcome. I'm just going to read a couple of them. Here's the first one, the very first one. Absolutely no pets of any kind are allowed in the unit. Pets in the units will result in immediate eviction. Eviction? I'm here for a week. And a minimum $330 steam cleaning charge. Okay, welcome, welcome. Number 2 is in all caps and boldface. Checkout time is promptly 10 a.m., no later. Jeez, I've been here like 7 minutes and I'm already... Then it goes through all these other things where they ball you out for a whole bunch of other things. Now it comes down to number 8. Now look, gang. I know you've been to this program. You've been to this program where they, 2 things they taught you in the management program. They always teach you. Criticize in private, praise in public, right? You've heard that. And the other one is, if you have to criticize someone, you always leave them on a high note, right? If you can. I mean, they don't want to seem false, but you try to leave on something kind of good. So I suppose that's what they did with this one. Number 8. Verbatim. Please do not put cigarettes, bones, paper, metal, potato peels, or any fruit peelings in the garbage disposal. Sounds simple, but it seems many past users failed their common sense class in school. I think some of them failed their anger management class. But again, the question is, how many people read that and thought it seemed great? So just read everything that comes out of your department, out of your division, out of your area, and make sure it's giving people the right impression. Okay, so the third of the traits that I wanted to talk about for a few minutes today about great leaders that I think we can all benefit from is they bring energy and enthusiasm every day. And I know it ain't easy, but they do. First question, am I taking care of me? That has to be the first question. I went to a program one time and the fellow talked about, and I love this phrase, he said, how many of you are engaged in intentional wellness? I really like that phrase. Intentional wellness. Doesn't mean being crazy. It just means paying attention. Eating, good things most of the time. Do I like a handful of potato chips now and then? Sure. Do I like a piece of cherry pie? Yes, thank you. How about this afternoon? But I pay attention. I get exercise almost every day. My wife and I are able to swim almost every day because we live in Florida. Am I taking care of me? Because most of us, that's not true. Not you. You're educated, bright, super duper people. But a lot of people don't. And they pay. because they haven't put themselves on their agenda. And they haven't paid attention to themselves. And I know, you get busy, I get busy. And I've traveled a lot. I've traveled more than 5 million miles over the last 40 years. And it's hard to pay attention. And I have 2 older sisters, and right now, in both of those families, either one of my sisters or their husbands are going through some real serious health things, and some of it is stuff that kind of could have been prevented, maybe, I don't know. But you just have to really pay attention, because without wellness, nothing else comes, right? We have a friend, Dr. David Robinson, who was the president of what was then called Edison Community College in Fort Myers, Florida, for 25 years. And in 1 year of his life, his wife asked for a divorce. His daughter was in an automobile crash in which one of her best friends died. And he had a near-fatal heart attack while up at High Point, North Carolina, and was brought back to life by the paramedics. We were in a Sunday school class together. And after he recovered, I said, "So Dave, what's the lesson for the rest of us?" And he said, "Take care of your family, take care of your health. There's nothing else." You know, and we don't. It's a shame we sometimes need to have heart attacks and other things to be reminded of that. Have you succumbed? Sometimes I think I succumb to what I call repetition apathy. I've always done this. I'm going to keep doing this. You get to an age where you sort of like that repetition, but it's now time to shake things up. I had a friend up at the University of Michigan who had gone through a pretty nasty divorce. And he was getting into that trap of sort of sitting at home at night, drinking too many glasses of wine, and eating takeout food and all that stuff. And he had some friends that he had met through a church, and they decided to have, don't jump to a conclusion of this, what they called this, I thought it was really funny. They decided to have what they called the Cheap Fantasy Club. The Cheap Fantasy Club was this. Everybody in the club, once a month, one person got to choose something for the club to do, but it only could cost $25. So that's not much of a fantasy. But sometimes it was a Detroit Tigers baseball game. Sometimes it was going to a flower show. Sometimes it was going to WWE professional wrestling, whatever it was. But the idea was you couldn't say, "Oh no, I'm not interested in that, I'm not going." The idea was get up and go, see something different, hear something different, enjoy something different. And he said it sort of snapped everybody out of that sort of repetition, apathy. When I was in Fort Myers, we had a group we called the Live Poets Society. Now the reason we called it that was we had gone to see the Dead Poets Society with 3 other couples, 6 other people from our church. And here's who was in the group. There was a pediatrician and his wife who was a neonatal intensive care nurse. There was Dr. Robinson, I mentioned, head of the community college, and his wife, who was primarily a housewife. There was a couple where the man was an urban planner, and his wife taught middle school gifted kids. And myself and my wife, who's a 5 times published novelist. So it's a kind of an intriguing mix of people. And the idea was that we would get together, we got together once a quarter at somebody's house, just to brainstorm and take care of each other and show each other love and bring up things that we couldn't figure out what to do. So as we got closer and closer and closer, we got really into this. And on this one particular occasion, people were going around the table asking things. This was about 10 years into my career, and things were really popping in my career, and almost too much. And it came to me, and I said, "Well, I'm kind of embarrassed, but I'm actually getting more requests than I wish to fill. I feel like, and I'm afraid to say no, but then if I keep saying yes, I'll be on the road too much. What should I do?" And David Robinson, the president of the community college, said, "Raise your fees. In fact, double them. And then travel half as much." I said, "Well, I like the math, but repetition apathy here said, I can't do that." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because I get repeat business from people," and I quoted them X, now I'm going to quote them 2 times X. A year later, they'll go, "I don't think so, Bill." He said, "That's right. And people will pick you who haven't picked you before because they thought you were too cheap at the lower rate and weren't worth it. Weren't worth being a good speaker." Oh, wow. And of course the rest of the group's going, no. So now we're driving home and my wife said, "Well, big boy, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to type up the new rates. I'm going to put them under the glass on my desk. Mr. Boldness here, and for 1 week, I'm going to quote the rates, and if everybody tells me to go jump in a lake, I'm going to go back to my old rates. Now, folks, you cannot make this up. That was Saturday. Monday, a woman at Dr. Robinson's college called me, having had no notion of our conversation, and said, Mr. Heckler, we'd like you to speak as our opening speaker at the student convocation. What would you charge? I gave her the new fee, and she said, oh my, I'll have to ask Dr. Robinson. I said, yeah, you do that. So I got to get off the stage and tell you the rest of it. So now it's Sunday, and we're in Sunday school. Now I'm Dr. Robinson, and Tim here is me. And Dave's up here, and he's greeting everybody. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you. He's a real cordial guy. Hi, how are you? How are you? He comes by me and he goes. But he paid me. And we've laughed about it for years ever since. So somehow we have to, if we're going to bring that enthusiasm, I love this. This was a piece in USA Today a couple of months ago about Itzhak Perlman. Everybody knows who that is, right? He said, the joy of playing the bread and butter pieces, which I'm asked to do more and more frequently, lies in continually rediscovering them as I get older. I listen better now, he said. I can hear the pieces and appreciate their beauty more, and as a result, I play them a little differently. If you're a golfer, he said, you have to be reliable, but you can't do that as a musician. The challenge, as I tell my students, is not how you play something the first time. What about the 10th or the 50th or the 150th? Am I going to play it the same way I did all along? Maybe yes, maybe no, but the point is, don't go on automatic. I just love that. And you know, if you've taught classes over the years, and the same class over and over, you know, we can go on automatic, can't we? We can, but we can't. And I always think that my wife and I, our drug of choice is Broadway shows. We've been to over 150 Broadway shows in New York, I'm embarrassed to say that, but we love the Broadway stage. And what I love about it is when I go, to me it's opening night, and the actors, the performers, the dancers, the singers, they act that way too. Even though they're doing it 8 times a week, for heaven's sake. 6 nights, 2 matinees, in the same place, with the same gesture, causing the same emotional reaction. I think we all need to have an opening night philosophy. Not just when we're in front of students, not just when we're in front of other faculty, not just when we're at conferences like this. Every day. See, we can't wait if we're going to educate and innovate and elevate. We can't wait. We can't wait for the new software program. We can't wait for the new dean, or the move to the new building, or the semester to be over, or the sabbatical to occur. We can't wait. George Bernard Shaw wrote in one of his plays more than 100 years ago this little passage. He said, people are always blaming their circumstances for what they are. I don't believe in circumstances, he said. The people who get on in this world are the people who get up and look for the circumstances they want. And if they can't find them, make them. And one last thing I want to just say, and that is, don't forget, and I don't preach to the choir, don't forget how much impact you have every single day. I think sometimes we sometimes forget. I do. I get wrapped up in planes that are late, and cab drivers that don't speak English, and hotel rooms that aren't set up the way I asked, and tummy aches from road food and all that stuff. Until this one day when this lady called me from Venice, Florida, the Venice Hospital. And it is funny how people say things. She said, Mr. Heckler, this is so-and-so from Venice Hospital. Some of our people have heard you, and they told us you're occasionally funny. I said, well, they left out the word looking, but you're right, I think. She said, and next month is Mental Health Month, and this is why we thought of you. She said, we have a group here called the Care Club, and it's a group of senior citizens who we want them to come here to take classes and dance and have all kinds of things so that when they have to come here for treatment, they feel good about the hospital and the people here. And we would like you to speak to them. Now, have you ever spoken on the subject, the healing power of humor? I said, I actually haven't, but I believe in it, and I think I could put something together. She said, well, great. What would you charge? And I told her, and she said, fine, we can do that. Now, this was about 6 weeks before the event. She said, what shall we call you? I said, how about motivational humorist? She said, okay, all right. She called me back 3 weeks later and said, Mr. Heckler, we're having a negative reaction to your program. I said, gee, that usually happens after I've spoken. What would be the negative reaction? She said, people are nervous about your being a motivational humanist. Oops. Well, I figured she had misunderstood me, but I said, maybe I mispronounced it. It's humorist. Ha ha ha, humor. Ha ha. She said, oh my goodness, I'm a senior citizen myself. I'm so sorry. It's all right. We got it. You come to the side door, 2:30. Okay, great. So I pull up to the side door, and I can't even think of something in this room that's that big, but almost, honest to gosh, almost as big as these 3 panels. There's a sign on the side of the hospital. Today, 2:30, Lou Heckler, nutritional humorist. What is that? Do I have to start with a head of lettuce, some cabbage, and some carrots, walked into a bar? I mean, what do you do? But I had great fun with it. I talked about how I really was a nutritional humorist, that humor was nutrition, and it really fed our souls, and we just had a great time. And I'm telling you, the about number of people in the room that are here, and it was just a wonderful audience. And when I was finished, I would, honest to gosh, I'd say, this is another hint, I would say 100 people came up to shake my hand. They were so sweet. They do that two-handed thing. And there was one woman standing in the very, very back, in a plain house dress. And she had, my mom would do this when she was getting older. She was kind of taking a hanky and going like this. And I just gestured for her to come over. She came over and she took my hand. She said, Mr. Heckler, she gripped it really tight. She said, Mr. Heckler, I can't thank you. Said enough for today. I can't thank you. I said, oh, ma'am, I need to thank everybody in this room. This is like one of the best audiences ever. And she said, now let me finish. She said, my husband died 7 months ago. It's been a tough year. She said, today's the first day I've laughed. Do you have any idea what impact you have on people? Don't ever forget that. Be reminded of it every day. Be committed to it every day. Be that leader every day. I'm so grateful that you came to Atlanta. We're so grateful that you asked me to be with you, and I wish you all the best.